All right, everyone, welcome back to Financial Clarity for Doctors. I'm Corey Janoff, joined as always by Rachelle Vanderzanden.
Yes, I'm here again.
There we go. And there was an article, well, recently for me, but by the time you hear this, it'll be about a month or so ago, or call it April, in the Wall Street Journal, about a proposed tax change that would increase taxes for households earning more than 400,000 a year. And this, was picked up by a lot of other media outlets and blogs and whatnot. And regardless of the politics side of it, whether you're in favor of a tax increase or not, or tax the rich or not, or whatever, that aside, the sentiment of the people interviewed in this article was interesting. Some people who earn over 400,000 a year felt that was plenty of income, and they feel like they could afford to pay more taxes if they had to and wouldn't feel bad about it. Others felt, they work hard for that income and they don't necessarily consider themselves rich, even though they realize they make a good income. It's not, they don't feel like they're living a lavish lifestyle. They're paying their bills and they have to make decisions on, should we save over here or should we take this vacation? Can't do both type of thing. So it's just really interesting and got us thinking about what is considered rich. Like, is there a line in the sand of if you're on this side, you're rich. If you're on that side, you're not. Or, maybe it's more of a sliding scale with a lot of gray area. There's probably certain geographic implications. If you live in a small town where your house costs $1, probably feel money goes a little further than if you're living in an expensive city where there's really no houses for under $1 million. And then what about income versus net worth? You might have a high income, but a low net worth, especially if you're early in your career. A lot of doctors start their career with a negative net worth just due to student loan balances. Or what if you have a high net worth, but a low income? You have a lot of assets, but you're not bringing in a lot of money. So, you're basically living paycheck to paycheck. How much do you need to feel rich? And as with a lot of things, Rochelle and I's favorite answer, it depends.
Yeah, it's all a state of mind, right? But we are going to start with some numbers today just to walk through like what about different scenarios here? What if we look at income? What if we look at net worth? What if we look at your bills? Like what does it take to really have that mentality of, I feel wealthy or I don't feel wealthy? I think income is a big driver. And I like to prompt clients and remind clients in meetings that they usually make a good chunk more than the average person, average American, average person globally, absolutely. But just as a way to kind of put this in perspective, the median household income in the United States, according to the 2022 census, was almost $75,000. There were only 12% of households that were earning above $200,000 per year. And there were only 5% of households that were earning above $295,000 per year. So with that $400,000 number that we're talking about in relation to the tax proposals, only about 2.6% of households actually earn above $400,000 per year. So it's a pretty small percentage of people that this would actually affect. And it's harder to find consistent global data, but it appears that the average global household income is about $12,000 per year, so significantly less. And making over $100,000 even puts you in the top 10% of earners globally. So it's pretty obvious that most people, when you are an in-practice physician, you make well above average, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you feel wealthy.
I
The
think it's
other thing,
worth
yeah, go ahead.
touching on the average versus median
Yep.
here. We've been throwing out a couple different numbers. Some people tend to use average and median interchangeably, but they're not. So the average is you just take all of the individual numbers and then divide by
The
the total
number of
number
numbers.
of people. So if they're, if you're taking the average of 100 people, some people are earning $1 a year, some are earning $1 million a year. Say the average is $100,000 of income per year, but that average could be skewed based on, the outliers. Maybe there's one person that earns 500 million a year and everyone else is a student. All right, the average is 100,000. Don't check my math here. I'm making these numbers up on the fly. But, really there's only one income earner out of this 100-person set, whereas median is right in the middle. So 50% of people earn above that, 50% of people earn below that. So the median, I think when we're talking about income and net worth, is probably a better um,
A better measure. Yeah.
measurement to look at, because it shows, all right, 50, this is the 50 percentile line. Half of households are above this number, half of households are below, because with averages, a big outlier could really, mess with it and skew the numbers one way or the other. And with some studies, they'll drop the big outliers, if there's something that's outside of several standard deviations, they'll get rid of it. But anyways, median versus average, if you forgot from statistics class back in high school.
Which you probably took at some point. But so we're going to talk about a few average numbers now because we had some average doctor income numbers that we had pulled up as well, just to say, okay, like how does this compare to median household income? So the 2024 Medscape Physician Compensation Report said that the average physician income for all physicians was about $363,000. The average primary care income was about $277,000. Specialists were higher at about 394,000 on average. But keep in mind, like every study is a little bit different. Like a lot of this is self-reported data too. So it's like, okay, like how solid are these numbers? But still, it gives us a frame of reference, like an idea at least of what your income is. It can be a very, very, very wide range. Like pediatricians earn $260,000 on average, but there's a lot of starting pediatricians that earn significantly less. There's lots of partners that earn more than that. Cardiologists on average earn like $525,000 per year. And like, dermatologists have the highest dollar per hour revenue. So depending on what kind of medicine you practice, your income can be very, very, very different.
Yeah, and there you might work 80 hours a week and earn a higher income, but if, a primary care doc is working 40 hours a week, it might be a similar dollar per hour to you. So how valuable is that time? And then, having free time, control over your time can help you feel rich. And like Rachelle mentioned, every study is going to be a little bit different. A lot of it's self-reported. Doximity did a similar study on physician income, and I think across the board, the compensation reported was about 10% higher than the Medscape study. So, none of it's going to be 100% accurate, but it at least gets you a rough idea of where doctors stand. I think it's no secret specialists earn more than primary care. Not all specialists though, like there's certain fields where if you're in like if you had to go to a fellowship for 3 years for certain types of infectious disease, they don't really earn much at all.
That's totally what I was thinking about too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it really does vary. And even within the specialist field, like you might be a general surgeon at a hospital, maybe you make 400,000 a year, but then there's a orthopedic surgeon in a private practice making 1.5 million a year between compensation. They own the building that they work at with their partners, and they're collecting revenue from the office lease. So they're part of a surgery center. They get revenue from that. There's all sorts of, there's a wide dispersion even within specialties. But for what it's worth, those are the rough numbers from two relatively reputable sources in the physician space. So,
Kind of the
so yeah.
next measure of how we potentially look at whether you're rich or not is the net worth that Corey was mentioning. So I think we've talked about net worth a couple of times before, but just as a reminder, it's like you line up all your assets on a piece of paper and you line up all your liabilities, like everything that you owe money on the other side, and you subtract the liabilities from the assets, and that's how much you have. That's how much you own. And that's kind of the value of things. So that includes things like the value of your home, subtracting the mortgage, or, and then there's other things within your net worth that are a little bit harder to measure because they can fluctuate a lot, so stock ownership. Yeah. And it's not something that's easy to report. It's not like you can look at your tax return and see your net worth. Like it's not something that you do on a regular basis necessarily, but it's a good thing just to have a pulse on a little bit. The median net worth in America is $193,000, according to the Federal Reserve's 2023 survey of consumer finances. That's a mouthful. But the average net worth is $1 million. So this is another example of that median versus average number where, the higher net worth folks really skew the numbers when we're looking at median versus average and we're talking about net worth.
Yeah, if you're Elon Musk and worth 300 billion, that's gonna, you know, skew the average for thousands of people that are, worth $0. Um, and I do like to reemphasize what Rochelle said on the net worth is maybe it's a less transparent, harder to determine number than income. This is why you'll occasionally read articles about a net worth tax. It's going to be really difficult to implement because a lot of these values are subjective. Like, what's your home worth? Sure, you could look it up on Zillow, but that's just some computer program's guess. It's really only worth what someone else is willing to pay for it if you try to sell it. Um, and that could vary widely by what's happening in the economy in any given moment, your local area. Like I know in Seattle, for example, this was maybe about a year ago, Amazon went through a big round of layoffs. So if you live in a neighborhood in Seattle where a lot of Amazon employees live, your home value probably went down quite a bit if a lot of the employees who had jobs no longer have jobs. And they're maybe trying to sell their house. So the influx of supply, less demand, that's going to really drive down house prices. Opposite holds true if a company goes public, all their employees now have an influx of cash from their stock options, and they all start buying houses in the nice neighborhoods. That's going to drive up home prices. And stock prices fluctuate by the minute, so really, it'd be difficult to implement a net worth tax. But I think from our perspective as financial planners, net worth is a better measuring stick of wealth because your income, it's great if you're in a high income, but if you spend every penny of it, it doesn't really do much for you other than, lets you live day to day. Whereas the net worth is what you keep. So what you own minus what you owe, what's left over, that's, what you actually have to your name and can live on in your retirement years. It's going to vary widely by age. A few more data points for you. The median net worth for people under the age of 35 is $39,000. A lot of doctors under the age of 35 have a negative net worth and just due to those student loans. The age bracket, age 65 to 74, has the highest net worth of all age groups, which makes sense. That's typically right around when you're about to retire, your asset values are at their highest. And then as you get further into retirement, you're spending down your assets. But the median net worth in that demographic is 409,000 in America. So half of Americans age 65 to 74 have more than 400,000, half have less than 400,000. The bottom 50% of Americans have a net worth of less than 100,000. The bottom 25% are basically at zero. So, a quarter of Americans have no assets to their names when you factor in debts with that. The top 10% of households in America, so this is probably what doctors should be comparing themselves to if you're shooting for long-term results here, it have a median net worth of about 3.8 million. And so within that top 10th percentile, so that would imply if that's the median, 3.8 million would be at the 95th percentile. 5% of that bracket has above 3.8 million, 5% is below 3.8 million. So, if you want to be in the 95th percentile of households, 3.8 million of net worth. And for comparison, Medscape survey that they do on physician finances, I forget if it's annually or biannually, but the most recent one shows that the majority of doctors over the age of 45 have between 1 and 5 million of net worth. So that would kind of put them in that close to that top 10% of households in America, which, should be expected as their income is in that top decile of Americans.
And now they've had a little time to catch up from med school and residency and fellowship and all of those things. Yeah.
For sure.
I think that is one important thing. We already talked about it a little bit, but if you're 35 and you're a doctor, don't expect to have a big net worth. Like it takes time to kind of rebuild after you invest a lot of time and money in your education and training. But it will happen eventually for most folks. I do think that one other thing that really affects how we feel about our finances and our wealth is just our cash flow. How much you earn and your net worth may matter a little bit less than how much money is going in and out every month, especially your fixed expenses. So fixed expenses are like your mortgage and your car payment and all of those kinds of things. If you're spending the majority of your money on student loan payments would be a big one too. But if you're spending the majority of your money on your bills and you don't have a lot of extra wiggle room, then that can feel like you're definitely not rich. But it doesn't necessarily, maybe we need to make some changes a little bit. But if you earn like $12,000 per month after taxes and making your retirement plan contributions and work and everything like that, that's potentially up to like $250,000 per year or more, but you have bills of like $10,000 every month, you don't feel rich at all. If you earn significantly more, maybe you take home $30,000 after taxes, which would be more like $600,000 gross annually, but you bought a home in the San Francisco Bay Area and you still have a large student loan balance and you like to travel internationally, maybe to go visit family or something like that. Well, that's not going to feel like you have a ton either. Like it can go quickly if you have a lot of expenses that you feel like are necessary in your life. Um, and yeah, I think if you can do a lot of those things, sometimes that makes you feel wealthy. Like if you can afford the big mortgage, you can afford the big car payments and the traveling internationally. But for some people, those things feel necessary, not extra. And if you don't have a lot of extra money to spend, then you don't feel wealthy anymore. So I do think it's very much a matter of perspective and how you're thinking about these things as well.
And we're not trying to shame anyone if you make a high
No.
income and spend a lot of money. Like you should spend more if you make more. Your lifestyle should improve and increase as you move up the income spectrum. But from a financial planning perspective, it's really important to make sure you're living within your means and make sure your savings rate also increases with that income and lifestyle and spending increase. So, we often talk in percentages a lot with our clients and tell doctors, a good general rule of thumb is once you start working, try to save at least 20% of your gross income for retirement. And regardless of what your income is, if you can start doing that in your early 30s, save 20% of your income consistently as your income increases, make sure your savings rate stays at 20% of that income. So if you're starting at 200,000 a year, save at least 40 grand a year. If your income grows to 500,000 a year, now you want to save 100,000 per year and make sure you continue to increase that savings rate as your income increases. If you can do that, that should put you on a pretty good path to retire at a reasonable age, late 50s, early to mid 60s. I'd like to think, no guarantees, some of it's dependent on what the stock market does over that time span, tax laws, inflation, cost of living, et cetera. But, it should put you on a pretty healthy trajectory. But if you're spending all of your paycheck, regardless of what your income is, like Rachelle said, it's going to feel tight and you're not going to feel like you're making progress towards your financial goals because you aren't. You're spending all your money. So we got to find that balance, but you absolutely should be spending more as your income increases.
Yep. I think a lot of the feelings behind like, are we wealthy? Are we not wealthy? Just depends on who you're comparing yourself to. So we talked through a lot of numbers where very obviously, if a physician is comparing themselves to the average American or to the median household income in the United States, you sure would consider yourself rich, I would hope. And compared to the rest of the world, then Americans in general are filthy rich. Like, I think maybe our cost of living is higher in some places. So that also affects that. But still, like, we have a lot of resources, a lot of cash just flowing around in our economy that can make us feel very wealthy, depending on how we're approaching it in our minds. A specialist earning $400,000 or more, that puts you in the top 3% of households in America. Even the average PCP is in the top 10% of earners in the United States. So that's huge. But if you're a pediatrician and you're earning half as much as a cardiologist and you think about that, like, what if I had specialized? What if I had made different choices? Then maybe you don't feel rich because you feel like you missed out or something like that. I think it definitely just depends on what you're thinking about. The other thing is, I think we've touched on this a couple of times, but geography is huge. If you live in an expensive city and if you have children, like even earning $300,000 per year, you may not feel like it's very much. And it may not go very far in a place like that, especially if you have kids. But you're still making more than 95% of people in America. Like you are, which is great, which is amazing. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably going to end up above average at some point, even if you're not there yet, simply because personal finance interests you and you care about it. So you're probably prioritizing saving and things like that, which will build your net worth over time, even if it takes a little while to get started.
For sure. Yeah, comparisons are can be the root of all evil. Like,
Brutal.
yeah. Like, do I have more than you? Do you have more than me? Hey, they have that thing. I want that thing. It's just, your neighbor gets the riding lawnmower, zero turn, goes 10 miles an hour, like, and you're still pushing the mower to mow your lawn. All right, you might want to upgrade your grass cutting game.
We
So
know what
like
Corey's thinking about right now.
well, luckily I have a small grass area and have a little electric push mower that works. But still, like, I don't think the riding mower would just be more of a pain, but hiring a landscaper might be appealing. Save myself a, half hour or so a week of mowing and edging and whatever. But that's neither here nor there. Well, it is because it's comparing. If I'm seeing all the neighbors around me have landscapers doing their yard maintenance, and I'm slaving away trying to care for my own yard, well,
Oh
boo-hoo me.
no.
But it's we all do it. We all compare ourselves to other people. Social
It's so
media
true.
has made it
Hmm.
even worse because now we're not just comparing ourselves to our neighbors and our friends, like we're comparing ourselves to the Kardashians and whoever else is flaunting their riches on social media. But back to the theme of this episode, what is rich? What is considered rich? Sure, money is one measuring stick, probably, one of the most popular measuring sticks of wealth. But like there's other things that can lead you to be rich and feel like you have a fulfilling life. What about your health? If you're not in good health, more money probably isn't going to help you. I mean, maybe it will to some degree give you more access to treatments and healthier foods and whatnot. There is a direct correlation to income and longevity. So, people at higher income, tend to have better health and longevity than people at lower incomes. Relationships, if, according to an NIH study and probably plenty of others, social relationships are a major contributing factor to happiness. So if you're just miserable, like all the money in the world, maybe, more money can sure help temporarily buy happiness. But if you feel lonely and don't have any friends or family members that you're close with, that can be a little depressing. Um,
I'm
yeah,
such a Marvel geek. It reminds me of Doctor Strange. I'm like, poor Doctor Strange. He's so sad.
yeah, it's true. There's you go if you travel internationally, like you go to some of those little villages where people have probably never left a 30-mile radius of their home, they're happy as clams. They, play cards and, laugh and have meals together. And they don't live a rich lifestyle, but they probably feel very content and happy with their lifestyle because they have strong social relationships and they've got everything they need. Having a sense of purpose as well. If you feel like you're contributing to society, that can lead to fulfillment. Ramit Sethi, we've I think referred to him before on this podcast, but he writes and talks a lot about living your rich life, which is different for everyone. So his theme is say yes to what you love, say no to everything else. So if you love international travel, great. Let's find ways to travel internationally. If you don't like traveling, don't travel just because other people are traveling and they say it's cool. If you don't enjoy it, then it's not good for you. Find something else that's meaningful and important and fulfilling and happy for you. So it's going to be a little bit different for everybody.
I should have said no to the PTO, Corey.
Yeah, don't join the PTO or the
Don't do
HOA
that.
board or city
No,
council.
not going to bring you joy. Don't
No.
get guilted into it. I'm telling you. Okay, so how much is enough? When we get back to the money theme, it's like, how much is enough? Well, depends on who you ask. A reporter once asked John D. Rockefeller about this, the first billionaire in the US, how much money is enough? And Rockefeller replied, just a little bit more. And don't get stuck on that hamster wheel. You don't want to feel that way. Doctors might say, I need at least $5 million to retire, which equates to like $10 million 25 years from now. Yet over 95% of Americans are able to retire on less than $5 million, significantly less. Sure, some may be more comfortable than others, but a 5 million portfolio today would allow you to comfortably withdraw $200,000 per year from your portfolio in addition to Social Security. And for many doctors, that's more than enough, especially if your mortgage is paid off and your kids are out of the house, which I would think they probably would be when you're retired. For others, that isn't the lifestyle they want to live. They know that they want to be able to do and spend more than that. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that you need to save more than someone who is content with living on less. And a lot of this is like, it all relates back to, how important is the money piece? How important is the time piece? Because for some people, they would rather have more time to just do what they want to do and are happy making and spending less money. And other people, like, they want to live a really, really, maybe not lavish. That's not the right word, but I'm trying not to use the word rich because riches can mean so many different things. But if you want, more things and more experiences, you may need to earn more and you may need to work harder. And that might be a really like a trade-off you're willing to make and happy to make.
Yeah,
There's no right answer.
No. And finding that balance between living for today and saving for tomorrow is important because you never know. There may not be a tomorrow. But if there is, and maybe tomorrow lasts a really long time, we want to make sure we have enough so we can feel content and secure in retirement. And gets back to that savings rate. So for you younger doctors listening here, if you're still in training or just getting started in practice, like really try and do that at minimum 20% saving for retirement. If you can do that from when you start practice, which for most physicians is, early 30s, some are a little bit later, some, might be late 20s if you didn't do fellowship or something. But if you can stick to that, factoring in income increases over time, like most doctors 30 years from now should have a net worth 10 million or higher if you just save 20% of your income. Now, a lot won't because they won't save 20% of their income. But for those of you listening, again, you're prioritizing your finances. Yeah, if you can do that, like having that 5 million to 10 million number should happen. It might be hard to conceptualize in your brains if you're sitting on $100,000 in retirement now. How am I going to get to 5 or 10 million 20, 25, 30 years from now? Because our brains don't do compound math well at all. But if you pull up some calculators, Excel, whatever, there's online programs, you add in a growth rate and assume that the savings rate increases with inflation over time, like you'd be pretty impressed. It takes a little while to get the train rolling, but once it does, you'd be pretty impressed how significant that number can become over time. So
Absolutely. Yep. I think it's all a matter of making your own priorities, deciding what it is that you need to feel rich. And maybe you don't need to feel rich at all. Maybe that's not important to you.
there we go.
Yep.
Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.